Okay, we'll make a start. So it's a big welcome, a warm welcome to those attending and also to our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. This is a meeting of the Audit Committee. My name is John Chesshire and I'm the chairman of this meeting. Details of the business to be considered today is shown on the agenda, copies of which are accessible on YouTube underneath the broadcast. In terms of housekeeping, we're not expecting a fire drill, so if the fire alarm does go off, please follow officers to the fire exits and out of the building to the designated meeting points. For those in the room, please switch any mobile devices to silent before the meeting begins. For those watching via YouTube, if you're so minded, you can complete one of our residents' feedback forms. These can be found in the information section underneath the YouTube video. These forms are intended to help us to improve the way that we run our meetings. We'll move on to the attendees now, and as we did previously, we'll whip round the room, and if we could just give our names and acknowledge our sort of presence. So I'm John Chesshire, I'm the chairman of the committee.
I'm Councillor Nick Dennis, Councillor for East Coast and member of the committee.
Councillor Rita Chamdell, Councillor for Hillingdon West.
Councillor Tony Burles, Councillor for Uxbridge.
Councillor Abbey, Councillor for Useley.
Larissa Midoni, Audit Manager.
Helen Thompson, I'm a partner from Ernst & Young.
Stephanie Rayo, Internal Audit Manager.
Alex Brown, Head of Counter Fraud.
Michael Bradley, Interim Head of Internal Audit.
Andy Evans, Corporate Director of Finance. James Lake, Head of Pensions, Treasury and Statutory Accounts.
Anisha Teji, Democratic Services.
Thank you all very much indeed. We'll get the meeting formally underway now, and we'll turn to the agenda. Agenda item 1 is apologies for absence. Have we had any apologies?
Apologies from Councillor Lewis.
Thank you very much. Second agenda item is declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declarations of interest to declare? Thank you very much. In terms of the agenda, agenda item 3, all the items in the paper pack today will be considered in public. There are no Part 2 private agenda items for this meeting. Agenda item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 29th of September 2022, just a few weeks ago. Take a look through the meetings, through the minutes. Are there any suggested amendments to page 1, page 2, or page 3? Okay, thank you very much. The minutes are taken as prepared. Sailing through then, agenda item 5 already, the external audit update of the 2021-2022 statement of accounts. James, if you could introduce this, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to provide information that we're making good progress on the audit since the last committee. The pension fund side is almost complete now. That's very close to being signed off by the auditors, so that's going well. On the council side, we cleared a lot of the outstanding queries that were still outstanding at the last meeting, and we're making progress on the PPE, which was an issue that was sort of a sticking point slightly, but we've made a bit of progress on that, so hopefully now we're able to hand over a lot of information to EY so they can continue their work in auditing that. So that's positive. The national infrastructure issue is moving forward. I'll probably let EY expand on that, but that's moving forward and progressing in a positive way. So hopefully, sort of by the end of this year, beginning of next year, we should have a way forward on the national issue there. And EY have now just sort of started their value for money inquiries for the council. So with that, I'll pass over to EY, if I may, for their update.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, James. So I'm not going to say too much more in terms of going through the detail in the paper, but obviously we're happy to take any comments or questions that members may have on the detail. Absolutely sort of support what James has said. The audit has been progressing along since our last meeting. I feel that we've made some good progress in some meetings today around the property, plant and equipment issue. In terms of infrastructure, at the risk of boring the committee, the summary position is that DLUC have issued a consultation paper on what they think a statutory override should look like, so in terms of their statutory instruments. As a firm, we have commented back on that. We had a couple of points, one of which related to getting absolute clarity over the position with regard to opening balances to avoid any doubt in anybody's mind about how the statutory override should be applied. And the other point was in relation, quite a technical point in relation to how the override applied to accounts where the opinion has been issued but have not yet been certified. So for Hillingdon, for example, for the 2021 accounts, we have not yet certified them closed, but we have issued the opinion. There was a helpful conversation between representatives of our firm and DLUC, so it's clear that DLUC are looking to listen to the concerns raised by either firms or other interested parties in the consultation to get to a position that everyone can agree on. And the timetable remains in line with what I think I probably laid out, sort of set out maybe in September, which is we are expecting a statutory override to be put before Parliament in the form of a statutory instrument at the end of November. There is then a period of time that it sits in front of Parliament, then it becomes effectively extant. So by the time we come back after our Christmas break, then we would hopefully be in a position to start to move audits forward on that issue. And the intention for all parties involved is to try and avoid modifications or forms of modified opinions to financial statements. Alongside DLUC's work, SIPFA are also need to work on an proposed amendment to the Code of Audit Practice to support the statutory instruments. So hopefully those two things together are moving along. If we get to that place, then that will make life somewhat simpler for all audit firms in terms of being able to move open audits forward and to be able to move 21-22 audits forward as well. So the challenge that we continue to have is around making sure, now that we know that the PPE work has got to a point, that we have the resources then to take that forward. So Larissa and I will be working on that over the next week or so, and then we'll have discussions with James and Andy about what that means in terms of timetable. Larissa, is there anything you wanted to add at all? But happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed. Any questions from the papers supporting the progress update?
Yes, Chairman. I know we've talked about having PPE. Could you just give a bit more of an elaboration on that for our knowledge? And you said you've made some progress. Obviously, that's a significant delay as well.
So in terms of property, plant and equipment, what we're looking at in that area of work are the valuation, this is for operational land and buildings largely, are the values materially correct as at the 31st of March 2022? So we look at both the value where the assets that have been revalued in the year, so we do a testing of those to make sure that we are comfortable with the assumptions that have been used in reaching the valuations. Obviously, it's a big area of judgment and estimation. You could put two valuers in a room and come up with three different outcomes, almost certainly. So it's not a precise answer, but it's getting comfortable that they can't be materially accurate. More broadly, we then make sure that all assets have been revalued. So all of the assets in the fixed asset register that should have been revalued over a 5-year period have been. And we also look at when were those assets revalued and could there have been a material change in that valuation from the date they were last revalued to the 31st of March 22. It's that latter part of work where we have had some discussions with the council, because on the face of it, it would appear that there are a small number but material number of assets that may not have been revalued, but there may be a good reason for that, and there may be an answer. So that's one thing we've been following through. The other has been, how is the council comfortable that assets that we revalued maybe 4 years ago still are materially accurate. So that again is something that's being worked through. And then finally, one of the issues that came to light as we were looking at the sample for this year was that the floor areas which were the basis for some of the assumptions were not necessarily 100% accurate. So there may have been additions to buildings. So there's been a process of data cleansing to a certain extent on the assets that were selected for our valuation sample about floor areas. Then we need to step back and say, could there be a material impact on that on the whole population? So that's the work that's still in progress. But I think we have got to a place where we're confident we've got the information that we need for the sample of assets that we are looking at, and that will move ahead from this point, and then the other bits of work are still being worked on. Sorry, that's probably more detail than you wanted, but never let it be said I don't give you what you want.
And just to clarify, that floor areas issue, is that the bit on page 11 where you say the external valuer used incorrect information for valuing certain assets? Is that the floor area bit? Because those words sort of leapt out at me a little.
We also asked the council to consider, what's led to this. So what's been the root cause, and we think it's probably there's no single cause as to why this may have happened, but I think a part of it is information was passed to your specialist valuer at the start of their contract. It's whether or not all of the correct information has been passed on to them subsequently to that by the council, or whether or not the valuer has recorded that information appropriately in their own systems, or a combination of the two that has then led to that. My understanding is that Andy and James have asked internal audit to do some additional work around properties, so they might want to touch on that in this instance.
I would be interested in just knowing a little bit more. Obviously, an error has occurred somewhere, and those words leapt out at me. So, what's the next steps, I suppose? Thanks, Andy.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to follow that up, I mean, I wouldn't say, I'm not downplaying it, but I wouldn't say it's a major cause for alarm. If you said to me before the audit started, where might some issues and arise, and I would have said the area of assets, putting aside the national issue around infrastructure assets. So I think what's important is we take this and learn the lessons, build it into next year's audit programme. So what we've agreed, we made some good progress today in some face-to-face meetings, that we'll take this through into an internal audit report. May not be a typical assurance report, maybe a bit of consultancy work. I think, as Helen said, there's a number of factors that probably played into this. One, it's the sheer complexity that we're dealing with. Second, there's been a bit of staff turnover in the service area. So I think we'll sweep all that up into the terms of reference in the internal audit report and make sure we pick up on that and make sure try and make sure as far as we can that it doesn't happen next year. But as I say, it's not something that's going to, I think, affect the overall opinion of the audit report, but clearly it's something we need to take seriously and deal with.
All right, thank you very much indeed. Any other questions, colleagues, on the progress of the accounts? Okay, then thank you all very much indeed. And good luck over the next few months. Agenda item 6 then, Internal Audit Progress Report, Quarter 2, 2022 to 23, and the Quarter 4, 2022-23 IA Plan. Over to you, Michael. Welcome to the Audit Committee.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, this is the summary information on all internal audit work for Quarter 2, and also, as you say, the plan for Quarter 4. In the period, we have issued 5 assurance reviews and 3 grant claims, all which have come out with either a reasonable or a substantial assurance outcome. Those are detailed in Section 3 of the report. More detail is obviously included at Appendix B of this report. Moving on to the sort of staffing position for the internal audit team, as the committee is aware, is facing some resourcing challenges. However, the new head of audit and risk assurance has been identified and will join us in late January. As I said, there are of the other team members 8 of the posts in HIA, 5 are vacant, and a further team members on sick leave, so that the remaining team is working very hard on producing high quality work in these circumstances. We've also undertaken an arrangement with Mazars to deliver an element of the annual audit plan. We're working closely with them to ensure that they're working to our standards. We're also put out a recruitment exercise for a new principal auditor to join us. And the rest of the report is the details of the where the plan is at Appendix A in terms of what's produced, what's in train, and at Appendix C, the details of the plan for Q4, including some detailed rationales for each of the pieces of work. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed. Any questions? Councillor Dennis.
Hi. So I'm sort of quite new to this committee, relatively anyway, started in May. I just want to ask a question about how you decide how much work you do, because obviously with having a lot of staff vacancies, that obviously stretches the team, and I can see from the report on page 22 you have got some support from external accountants, which is great, but obviously I assume that comes with costing implications, and at the moment costing implications are a very important factor, more important than they normally are. So when you're deciding to do work, cost implications come in as well. So what I want to know is, I suppose, how do you decide what work you do, and are you satisfied that you're able to do the amount of work that you need to do in order to check that things are going okay in terms of how the council is running? Does that make sense?
It's quite a big question. Typically, putting an annual audit plan together, you'd work out roughly what the risk appetite of the organisation is. You work out what internal audit resource you have available, so the number of staff, the budget, what your strategy is in terms of delivering the audit function, how much internal, how much external. You come up with usually a number of days. For a local authority in London, it's roughly around 1,000 days of internal audit work in the year. You then try and direct that resource at the highest risk issues, the issues that matter most to the audit committee and to senior managers, usually by looking at the corporate risk register, departmental risk registers, having discussions at departmental management teams, producing a draft plan, consulting on it. You end up with 1,000 days work of work which should be targeted at things that matter to the council. Then that's delivered at Hillingdon on a quarterly basis. Things come on and go off the plan during the year. It's quite flexible. We have a quarterly plan here which helps actually in terms of that flexibility. In terms of the cost of Mazars, which is a recent development, there are quite a few staff missing, so the salary budget of that is helping to pay for that.
Are we satisfied that what we planned to do originally, what we thought we needed to do, we're able to cover that work? Or are we cutting corners is not a great phrase, but are we actually, are we satisfied with doing enough work that we want to do, considering the amount of vacancies there are?
I would just need to go back and check. I haven't done the review since I've been here of what was on the plan originally at the start of the year and what we've done at the end to see where we're at. But it's a worthwhile exercise. Ultimately, we're trying to get enough work in order to give the head of audit enough information to produce an annual opinion and to give the audit committee satisfaction that there is enough audit resource to give you the assurance you need, and that's in train going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chairman. And my apologies, the A40 was gridlocked getting here, so my sincere apologies. I'm picking up on pretty much on what Councillor Dennis has just been saying, but the numbers are shocking, really. That if I'm reading this correctly, you have 8 staff below you, 5 positions are vacant, and 1 is on long-term sick leave. So that actually means, if I'm reading this correctly, you have two staff.
That's correct. There are 2 in-house staff. There's also the arrangement with Mazars, who provide some sort of contingency days to deliver some of the audits that the lack of staff is not allowing us to do.
But if you've got 1,000 days of audit, you can't possibly be getting through that. Unless you're taking on Mazars for the balance.
We do have a seconded person from Mazars who's here with us for 3 months. We have prioritised work. As I said, we haven't done that exercise, or I haven't done that exercise of comparing what was in the plan at the start of the year to where we are now, just to say what hasn't been done. There is a significant amount of work been done by the staff that are here. I have seen it in the 6 days I've been here. It's good work of a decent quality. 6 or 7 pieces of work just missed the deadline for this report, for example, which have been finalised in the last few days. So I'm confident the work is done. Exactly how much has been done compared to what was planned to be done, I just don't have that answer at the minute, but I can get that.
Okay. My further concern would be that if the posts aren't filled, as a cost-cutting measure, the executive might be looking to do away with those posts. So you need to be fighting that. Yeah. I think that's what I would say.
Andy, would you like to come back on the last point in particular?
Well, yeah, I'll come back on both to an extent, because Michael's relatively new to the organisation, so he hasn't got the full background. So clearly, internal audit's a statutory role, so it's in terms of the overall resources, to address your last point, Councillor Lewis, we wouldn't be deleting those posts. It's my duty to safeguard those posts and make sure we've got proper arrangements for internal audit. So we need that resource. The Mazars contract has enabled us to manage the workload significantly this year. We've been able to pull additional resources through that contract. It had that flexibility. So we've probably not got to the level we'd ideally like to be, but enough for me to be satisfied that we've done a level of work that meets the criteria, the statutory criteria we need to do. As we said earlier, we've already got a head of internal audit joining us in January. We've got recruitment underway for the principal auditor, and we still have the Mazars contract sitting there in the background, as well as the seconded person from Mazars as well. He's quite an experienced resource. So we've been able to manage the situation. I appreciate on paper it looks like a massive gap, but having that Mazars contract has enabled us to manage it. Also, in terms of Councillor Dennis's point about the costing, having that contract means we've got better rates than if we'd gone out on a piecemeal basis, where we've been paying much higher rates. So hopefully that alleviates your concern to a degree.
And, I know the team have flexed and used the Mazars resource accordingly. Really, I guess things will become, we hope is not a great control, we hope things will become a little bit more stable with the arrival of the new permanent head of internal audit in January, because that will then allow them to go about the rebuild of the internal audit service. I guess after having got their feet under the table and worked through with you and other stakeholders, what the team could and should look like. Until then, it's with Michael to kind of lead the service and deliver as many products as we can over the next few months, I guess. Sorry, Andy, please.
One further point, Chair, if I may. The other advantage we've had is having a large internal counter fraud team. So I'll take this opportunity to acknowledge that Alex and his team have mopped up some work that internal audit might have actually done themselves had they been fully staffed. So there's been a bit of a safety net around the margins of this situation, and that's really helped us. A lot of other boroughs haven't got that level of resource in their fraud team, the flexibility and skills that team has to fill in some of the gaps, so worth making that point as well, I think.
Okay, thank you for all that. Councillor Bowles.
Thank you. Probably more of a comment really, but just looking at the work programme that you got for January to March, it's quite a robust and ambitious target. I hope, as I say, as a comment, I expect you to say you will be able to cope with it, but there's some big juicy topics in there like parking income, which is going to be very interesting, and the mental health pathway and risk management, etc. I just hope that we haven't taken on too much, so to speak, whether it was worth trimming down a couple of the topics for another time. Anyway, comment.
Sorry, do you mind if I answer that one? Okay, so looking at the plan, some of which are of varying sizes, some obviously are assurance, which is our bread and butter, and some are consultancy based. Some we have to undertake, which is the mayor's accounts, which relatively doesn't have the same weighting in terms of time as some of the bigger assurance reviews. Like you said, mental health pathway, you would have noticed that obviously this is quite topical at the minute, and obviously we've applied, in terms of high risk, this is where we should be looking into. We've actually got experienced where we've been looking at various audits in the previous quarters, such as referral and assessment, quality of practice in social care as well, and other elements of the service utilising the same system. It's under kind of like a thematic review, looking at the same, but obviously sampling in the different services, making sure that they're undertaking their statutory duties, also from a mental health perspective, but jointly working with social care. So we're familiar with the systems. We're making sure that we're allocating our our skills in the right way. So where we have these specialist ones, we utilise, for example, it might be myself doing mental health, where I'm familiar with the system to save time, and then having a more transactional audit going to Mazars. So we're utilising our resources in that way as well. I do think it's achievable. We've actually spoken with the stakeholders where we're actually not all starting all the audits in quarter four at the same time. So we're issuing the terms of reference, and I think one of which isn't even starting until March. So it will finish by the deadline, but it's actually not starting at the same time. So we should be able to balance that time.
Thank you. That's reassuring to know.
Thank you very much. I was actually thinking a couple more audits would be good things rather than a couple less, but...
Thank you, Chair. First, it was reassuring, Andy, from our perspective, that Alex's team has been able to support you, and that's reassuring that we have a multi-skilled team. So moving forward, when we carry out some recruitment, is that something that you would be looking at as well, to say that can we work across all the teams?
Andy.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think been having a lot of discussions with Alex about what that team does going forward. There's perhaps more work than there's more work than they can deal with at the moment. So it's making the right choices. What's the most effective use of their time? But I think once we get the head of internal audit in place, there'll be a key relationship between those two service areas, and it will strengthen us as a whole in the round. And what we're trying to do when we're recruiting is making sure we've got a mix of skills, and perhaps from a mix of sectors. So we take on some new ideas and look more widely, given the environment we're operating in. But certainly there's a lot happening in those two areas which I'm very positive about taking us forward. And obviously we've not gone too far with the internal audit recruitment, because we want to give the head of internal audit, the new head, the chance to shape that team to a degree, which we've had the luxury of doing, because as I said previously, we've got the Mazars contract there to give us some resources in this interim period.
Good. Look forward for an update at the next meeting then.
Thank you very much. I've got a couple of questions, if I may. One of the things that we really do need to sort out is the external quality assessment of the audit team. This was last undertaken in September 2017. They're supposed to be undertaken at least once every 5 years. It's not mentioned in the report, so I thought I would just ask, where are we with that, and will it be happening sooner, I hope, rather than later? Do we have an update at all?
Got an update.
It looks like hot off the ether.
I've got an update at 5 o'clock. Actually, I haven't read through it, but I'll update you. It's our colleague at Kensington Chelsea, who apparently hasn't been well for a while, but I'll come back to you on that.
Thank you very much. We must have that done as soon as we can to ensure we're operating in line with the public sector internal audit standards. I do have another question. On page 24, there's a reference made to the audit of absence management, one of the ones carried out earlier this year. Draft report issued 27th of April 2022. It is now November the 15th. Why has the final not been issued, and where are we? Or has it?
Okay. Yes, it is good news. So basically, the delay is down to, in HR, when the audit was undertaken, we had the draft report as issued. At that point in time, there was a number of improvement programs that they were initialising, and they were trying to align certain policies and getting those sorted. And then at the same time, we then had an interim head of HR, and now it's changed again. But basically, we've been in discussions with them throughout, and what they wanted to do was review the report and the recommendations to make sure that their responses, they could build it into the programs of work that they're rolling out and new systems they're building. So it was really reflective, and to ensure that actually the management responses weren't scrapped as soon as they were issued, basically. So we've now issued, so it's all good.
All's well that ends well. On page 25, there's an audit of information security, draft report issued 9th of August. Are we in a similar position of that one sort of about to be finalised?
There were some issues or points that management weren't in agreement with in terms of the audit. We were looking into it, and we've actually, to mop it up and to ensure that we can issue the report ASAP, we've actually got a meeting with the key stakeholders on Tuesday. So by the next meeting, you'll have an outcome.
Thank you very much. In terms of the forward plan, I agree with Councillor Bell, some meaty, high risk and very topical areas of interest in there, so we'll look forward in due course to the work and the reporting on those. Any final questions or any additional thoughts, colleagues? No. Final one from me then. The principal auditor recruitment, has that only just started, or are we partway through that?
It's about 3 weeks into it now, and we have 4 applications so far. We've given it 2 months to conclude, so hopefully there'll be some late applicants as well.
Good, fingers crossed. Thank you very much. Thank you all very much for the report and for the update to the committee. Agenda item 7 then, the Counter Fraud Progress Report, Quarter 2, 22-23. Alex.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to take the committee through the 2022-23 Q2 Counter Fraud Progress Report, which starts on page 35 of your packs. So the team's achieved £4.6 million in savings in Q2 across the 3 main service areas of revenues, housing and social care. This brings the year total savings to £6.9 million, meaning that we've already surpassed our £3.5 million target, and it makes 2022-23 the most successful year ever for counter fraud. A little bit of context behind that for the committee. In housing, we've recovered a further 22 properties in Q2, bringing the year-to-date figure to 37. Our best year since we introduced a risk-based approach was last year at 42, so I expect us to surpass that this year. If the committee would look at page 38 and table 1, I've slightly changed table 1 to the committee now. It was more about the amount of investigations we had and the property recovery, and it's now a little bit more transparent. It actually informs the committee of the reasons of why we've recovered properties. So what you will note is that non-occupation is clearly our highest fraud risk, which is a COVID legacy, which I spoke to the committee about in April. I expect that to change over the next 12 months as the cost of living crisis hits, and I expect that to turn to subletting. The committee may also notice that we've recovered a lot of properties in Q2 due to deceased, and this is because we're actually supporting tenancy services at the moment due to resourcing issues to recover the properties. Though this isn't obviously technically fraud work, it's important in this current climate that we recover all properties that are due back to the council due to the demand for housing. We've currently got 131 live tenancy fraud investigations. So looking back statistically, what that actually means is that we've got a 57% increase in tenancy fraud post-COVID, and I believe that is likely to stay. In the area of revenues, we've continued our revenues maximisation work, working with our external suppliers, and we've identified businesses again this quarter that have not been paying rates that should, and we've sent out bills totalling £2.6 million. This now brings the year-to-date to £4 million. A note for the committee at this point is the reason for this is there's been some quite large, high-profile items in here, large businesses that have gone undetected. What we're now seeing is that starting to diminish, and what we are seeing is just sort of a lot smaller outcomes in this area. So I think it's sustainable, but we may not see the dizzy heights of millions and millions of pounds in this area going forward. In social care, we've just concluded our biggest fraud case, where a client's relative has deliberately misrepresented the circumstances to receive a property disregard. We've proven otherwise, and we have now gone back to the client saying that they owe us £106,000. Looking forward into Q3, we're going to do a proactive project into homelessness and bed and breakfast, trying to identify non-occupation as sublet. We've started to collect the data sets in Q3 for the National Fraud Initiative, with the biannual match due to come back around mid-January. So there'll be a lot of work in terms of data matching for fraud, loss and error in Q4. And lastly, in Q3, we're changing our case management system. It's with the same supplier, but we've had a free upgrade to go web-based, which means that the system's a lot faster and it has a lot more functionality. So that is has now gone live. That's all from me, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed. A free upgrade, that doesn't happen very often, does it? What's the catch? Thank you very much indeed, Alex. Colleagues, any questions for Alex and the counter-fraud team? Councillor Lewis.
So it was, the system I believe was on our in-house servers. It was quite slow, but it's now going up into the cloud.
Oh, okay.
I think it's with Azure and with Microsoft. Actually, if you don't mind, Councillor Lewis, I remember a couple of committees ago, I was supposed to come back to you, you had a question around being able to tell if a council property is council property with the stickers on the boilers. I have an answer for you on that now. The answer is yes, we are still doing it. Not on the boilers, but we now have stickers in the inside of the kitchen cupboards that tell you that this is a council property and what you need to do for repairs.
Yeah, so I mean, we do it so that nobody's embarrassed. Yeah, that's great. Good.
Thank you. Any other questions or observations? Councillor Chandler.
Yes, just observation on your KPIs. A nice set of figures, Alex. Thank you. So I think everything you've done so far, if I'm reading it correctly, has been above target.
Yes, so it's been an interesting year. So we actually brought to committee in April, we increased our targets across the piece, and we've still managed to meet them all, even with resourcing issues throughout the year. So yeah, I'm really pleased, and the staff have done really, really well.
And I think that well done comes from every member of the committee. So well done to the team, well done to you. 4.6 million in loss prevention savings. That's no mean effort. And I know that you will all have worked very, very hard to have achieved that. It's a good report. No questions from me. Keep up the good work. And, you know, best of luck with it. Very well done. Excellent report, excellent figures.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Agenda item 8, Audit Committee Forward Programme. Anisha.
Thank you, Chairman. The committee is asked to consider the meetings upcoming and also the reports due for each meeting. So we've got two for this year, 31st of January 2023 and the 27th of April 2023. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes this evening's business. Thank you all very much for the reports and for answering our questions. We'll see you all again next time. Thank you. Good evening. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, all that.